Alright guys, so I'm gonna explain how you can actually reverse illnesses with sugar. So a lot of people like to demonize sugar, and most people don't understand what sugar is. Well, you have to keep in mind that sugar is just any other macronutrient. It's a macro, right? Carbs, right? Carbs are sugar. Like anytime you eat rice, pasta, like bread, that's all sugar. It turns into sugar, right? And a lot of people like to demonize carbs, like to demonize sugar. And here's the thing: there are a lot of foods out there that contain sugar, but sugar itself is not bad. All right, like things like fruits, honey, maple syrup. Right? Are you gonna tell me that fruits are unhealthy for you? Like, are you really telling me that? So it's not necessarily that sugar is bad. It's the type of sugar associated with certain foods that are bad. Like a donut. But a donut doesn't just have sugar. It has fat and it has fried things. Like there's a ton of things that are wrong about donuts that are not just that are not included with sugar. So that's what you guys have to keep in mind when it comes to doing these things, right, and understanding these things. Okay, but if we want to be able to reverse certain things, right, we have to understand that what the relationship between autophagy and how that relates to healing certain ailments, right? And autophagy basically means self-eating, right? Basically, you eat all the deadly cells in your body, and it basically recycles new cells with old ones, right? So you're basically becoming younger, right? And this only happens through a caloric deficit. A caloric deficit is one way to achieve autophagy, right? It doesn't matter if you're fasting. It doesn't matter if you're on keto or if you're eating a high carb diet. If you're losing weight, by definition, you're triggering autophagy because you're eating yourself, right? And losing weight is literally making you healthier. Weight loss is very healthy for humans because it kills old damaged cells and recycles them with new ones because you're literally self-eating. That's what it is, right? And there's actually a doctor named Dr. Walter Kepner, and he was able to cure the illnesses like diabetes, hypertension, all these things, right, and even cancer, with just sugar alone. And this can be done basically by reducing the amount of fat content in the diet. So what the doctor did was he basically reduced the fat content to almost zero and the protein to zero too. Now I don't recommend reducing the protein to zero just because you might lose muscle, but this doctor was able to cure patients with orange juice, rice, and table sugar. And you're like, oh my god, table sugar, that's so bad for you. It's like, well, my friend, this doctor literally cured his patients while feeding them this stuff. All right? So this works. And the main reason why it worked was just because sugar revs up your metabolism. It's actually, you burn more calories with sugar, but also they were in a caloric deficit. So a caloric deficit, basically autophagy, was the main reason why they were able to reverse these ailments, right? So it's not that sugar is bad. It's just that you have to keep in mind context matters, right? Even if you're eating a very healthy diet, if you are eating more calories than you're consuming, you're basically in a caloric surplus, and too much of a surplus and too much calories, that's always bad for you. Too much calories is always bad for you, whether it's healthy or not healthy. Now, it's easier to overconsume calories when it's unhealthy food, but ultimately, overconsumption of calories is ultimately bad for you. You're going to trigger chronic mTOR pathway signaling, right, which is going to age you, okay? Like that's chronic mTOR, right, which is not what you want. That's going to age you really fast. So too many calories is bad for you, not necessarily sugar. You guys understand? Now, people say like, okay, well, how can you cure cancer with sugar if, cancer cells, their cancer cells basically are fed with sugar. So you're feeding sugar when you're basically feeding the cancer cells when you eat sugar. So how can you reverse cancer when all you're eating is sugar? We have to keep in mind that context matters. If you're in a caloric deficit, you are killing more cancer cells than what you're feeding it. So yes, you are feeding cancer, but like I said, if you're taking advantage of autophagy by eating yourself, by being in a caloric deficit, then you can kill, if you're killing the cancer cells faster than it regrows, then ultimately you win. Because it's the net balance that matters. It's the net equation, right? If you're in a caloric deficit, you're burning more calories than you're consuming. So basically, you're eating parts of yourself every day when you're losing fat. You're soaking up and eating up and chewing up all the fat and all the deadly cells in your body, right? So it doesn't matter if it comes from sugar or not. It works. Now the original ketogenic diet was used to, for children to cure epilepsy and seizures, right? And the keto diet does work, right? Being in ketosis is a very therapeutical state to be in, right? And it's very convenient, and I recommend a lot of you guys try it out, mainly because it suppresses hunger. But this can also be done. The same results can also be done with a pure sugar diet, a diet where it's only sugar and no fat, right? Like I said, like what this doctor did with all his patients. So, I think the ultimate enemy, guys, when it comes to all these things, is just too many calories. All right, and we have to understand that a caloric deficit is basically going to solve most of our health problems. Most of the health problems that you have internally, when it comes to metabolic diseases, can be solved instantly by being in a caloric deficit, by getting on a diet. By being too fat, by being too obese, by over consuming too many calories, that is unhealthy, right? So if you do the reverse, eat less, be in a caloric deficit, right? You're more likely, you will heal and reverse these illnesses, even if you're eating sugar. So do you guys understand how you could cure these things by eating sugar, right? As long as the calories, like I said, are low enough to be in a deficit. What matters is that you're in a deficit, right? So guys, so that's my take on the sugar thing. So hopefully this is like informative, because a lot of people like to avoid sugar, but it's like, well, you should really only avoid sugar if you're consuming too much of it, right? Because too much of one thing is always bad, right? But if you keep the fats very low and you're eating clean, it's very hard to overconsume carbs if you keep the fats low. So I recommend lowering the fats if you're eating carbs. If you want to go keto, right, and eat a very high fat diet, I recommend lowering the carbs, right? You're gonna have to lower the carbs for that. I think the ultimate enemy is to combine high amounts of carbs and fats, because that really leads you to being and consuming too many calories, right? So that's my advice on that. But other than that, have a good day.